Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are tuned in to the Joseph Ben Show for Thursday, August the 24th. Got it right tonight. Last night I said it was Wednesday, August the 24th. Corrected it later on in the show, so I didn't leave all you guys thinking that I had not been paying attention to what was going on around me. I just sort of had a momentary lapse. Today is the 24th, the real 24th, Thursday, 2023. Thanks very much for tuning in. I am your host, Joseph Ben, and it is the day after the first Republican primary debate. I don't know if you had a chance to catch it last night. I want to get into that a little bit tonight, but there are a few other things that I want to mention, I think, that deserve being brought to people's attention. So before we get into our deep dive on the Republican presidential debate, or I should say the Republican primary debates. And am I the only person that's wondering, is this really how early they were doing it before? It just seems that every election cycle, the actual cycle starts sooner and sooner and sooner. Of course, the primaries don't start until 2024, early 2024. So here we are, only just halfway through 2023, and we're already having these debates. But anyway, as I said, I don't want to get too much into it right now. We'll talk about that moving forward. But there are other things going on in the world. And, you know, even though we're all fixated on what's happening in the United States with the upcoming election next year and everything surrounding Donald Trump, today, Donald Trump surrendered, turned himself in Georgia to answer to charges, all of the indictments. I think there were 19 of them, 19 charges or whatever in the state of Florida. And, you know, we've covered some of that before. You can go back to one of my previous episodes where I said basically it's time for Americans to decide, do they want to be the United States of America or the banana states of America? Because it's just crazy what's going on there down there right now, but no crazier than anywhere else. And, you know, the first thing is, first of all, who would have ever thought that this would happen? But I see that India, the country of India, has landed a spacecraft, I guess whatever you want to call it, on the moon. And I knew that they had a mission to the moon, and they haven't landed actual astronauts, so it's not a manned mission. But still, you know, it takes a certain amount of money and technology to get people to the moon. And of course, everybody in India is cheering and stuff like that. But am I out of line by asking a very simple question? And that is this an appropriate use of public funds in the state of India when so many of their people are suffering from malnutrition? I mean, if you've ever been to India, you know that the place is, I mean, there are just a lot of slums in India. And I don't mean any disrespect. It is what it is. I'm not throwing stones at them in terms of culture or how they're living, etc. But there's a lot of poverty. I mean, deep, deep poverty in India. And a lot of malnutrition. People are suffering from there, a lot of homelessness. And I'm just wondering, why does India, the government of India, think that it's such an important thing to develop a space program? And not just to develop a space program, because a space program could just be satellites and things like that for communications, but a space program where you're sending a mission to the moon and you're actually landing craft on the moon. For what purpose? Is there something that the Indians are going to discover in terms of geology, biology? Not that there's any biology that's appropriate on the moon, but what exactly are they going to discover that already hasn't been discovered? What are they going to measure that already hasn't been measured? So this strikes me as just kind of a prestige thing. And, you know, I guess I understand. I'm not condoning it, but I understand that different cultures and different countries are going to do the prestige thing from time to time. You know, rah-rah national pride, patriotism, jingoism, whatever you want to call it, nationalism. But you think that we're here in 2023, and you'd think that the Indian government would be more concerned with spending that kind of money, those resources, dedicating those resources to finding solutions that are going to alleviate the crushing poverty of so many of their citizens. And of course, the irony in all of this is that it's precisely the people who are suffering from that crushing poverty that mostly probably applaud this particular mission and feel that national pride as a consequence of it. It's just, another example of the kookiness, the quirkiness of human beings. It's not an Indian thing. And in case you're thinking that I'm thinking it's an Indian thing or I'm making that case, let's come all the way back to North America, where, yesterday I talked about Jordan Peterson and the fact that a court in Ontario, Court of Appeal, had dismissed his appeal of the decision, the order that had been made by the College of Psychologists, the governing body of psychologists, clinical psychologists in Ontario, the body that gives licenses to practice clinical psychology, had ordered him a little while ago, because of some harsh thing that he had posted on his Twitter account, ordered him to take some sort of sensitivity training, social media training is what they're calling it, in order to, teach him how to not trigger people who were reading his social media accounts. And he refused. And they basically said, either you do this or you lose your license. And, he made a reasonable case, even if what he had said, and I'm not even going to get into what he wrote. I don't really know. I saw it originally. I thought, this is stupid. It's, not what he wrote was stupid, but the fact that people were making a big deal out of it was stupid, and that the college was going to take some disciplinary action. All of that I thought was just stupid, crazy stuff. Okay, fair enough. So he appeals it to an appeal court here in Ontario, and the judges agree with the college. And there's just no rational common sense basis for that. And not only that, just as a matter of law, what he said was, one of his defenses was, look, what I post on social media has nothing to do with my clinical practice. And that's perfectly reasonable. I think that's a very powerful argument. Does the College of Psychologists have any right to discipline a member and order them to take some sort of training for behavior that has no impact whatsoever on the practice, on his practice? I can't understand for a second why anyone would think that that's appropriate. How is it possible in law? But apparently, the appellate court in Ontario agreed that it is within their jurisdiction. Now, just to put that into the right picture, imagine for a moment that your car mechanic that has a license from the Ontario government, because the government here licenses everything. So, you could be the best mechanic in the world, but you're not a licensed mechanic. Doesn't matter. Can't do car mechanics under license. So he's a licensed mechanic. And, he posts something a little off color, a little controversial on Facebook. So now along comes some sort of government body and says, well, you're going to lose your license to repair cars if you do not take some sort of sensitivity training. I mean, it's absurd on its face. Why would anybody think that they have the jurisdiction to interfere in anybody's livelihood when that livelihood does not impact, nor is it impacted by anything that they're saying or doing on social media? Unless it's really egregious. I think we can all agree that if it's really egregious, find, you could make the case, I guess, that, there may be something to do here, but, there are lots of mechanisms within the legal system that allow people to redress or to seek redress for something that was done that they feel that was wrong, against the law, unjust, without going down this road. So, if somebody feels that they were emotionally harmed by something that Dr. Peterson posted on the internet, okay, outside of his practice, that they feel they were triggered, or whatever else you want to call it, well, then sue him. You could take civil action. There's nothing stopping a private citizen from appealing to the court or applying to the court, petitioning a court for some action as a consequence of something that somebody did that you feel was wrong. But nobody does that. Instead, what we do is we use the administrative legal procedures that were never established to do this kind of thing, to supervise this kind of behavior. Never, ever established for this. The job of the College of Psychologists is to ensure that clinical psychologists, doctors who are practicing psychology, who are licensed to do this, perform their duties properly, respectfully, and within the boundaries of what is accepted appropriate therapy. Now, we can have an argument about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate in the therapeutic world these days. And I'll get to that in a second, okay? But that's a separate argument. And that's, nobody ever accused Dr. Peterson of doing something that was therapeutically problematic. And of course, that was his defense, but it wasn't a good enough defense, according to the Ontario Court of Appeal. So, look, we could... I bring this up again, even though we dwelt on it to some extent last night, but it's an illustration of how it's, when I ask a question, isn't the Indian government, the government of India, kind of kooky, kind of, I don't know, I want to say perverted almost when you think about it, twisted when it spends its limited resources on a mission to the moon. A successful mission to the moon, it appears, when it has such crushing poverty, such crushing health problems amongst its citizens. But no, let's send people to the moon. And of course, as I said, probably the people who are the proudest of their government in their country right now are precisely the people who are suffering the most. Assuming, of course, that, they even know about it. So, it's not just India that's kooky. Here we are, we're kooky here in Ontario, here in Canada. And, getting on to the whole therapeutic thing, I've tried to stay away from this a little bit, and honestly, I don't have any justification for not diving into this subject. And I'm going to dive in right now, head first. This whole transgender thing, and the whole idea that therapists, whether they're social workers or psychologists or psychiatrists, are supposed to indulge those youngsters, teenagers, who feel uncomfortable and confused as they go through puberty and their bodies change, especially young girls. Now, we have 3 girls, all grown up now, and puberty, it's perfectly normal for girls, especially for all teenagers going through puberty, to feel uncomfortable and confused, emotionally confused, etc. This is a perfectly normal thing. If you're a parent, you know that this is the case. If you have teenage kids. So what teenage girls are going through right now is nothing new. What's new is that rather than helping them cope and learning to be comfortable with their bodies and who they are and what they are. We indulge, we affirm, we embrace their discomfort. And rather than helping them to deal with that, which by the way is not just a life lesson to learn, it's not just something that you have to learn how to do, it's not just an important critical life skill when it comes to how you feel about yourself and how your body is, but it's a critical skill to acquire in order to be able to overcome adversity throughout life, which you are going to be confronted with time and time and time again. But instead of strengthening people, instead of helping and guiding them and teaching them how to cope and deal with these internal issues, these turmoils, we embrace the turmoil as if it's an illness, and then we try to remove the causes of the turmoil, the cause of the pressure, the cause of the discomfort, which is the change in their body. And of course, now we want to give it some sort of a scientific label. So it's just, it's so wrong, ladies and gentlemen. And there is something out there, I don't know, is it something in the water? Maybe it's just global warming. Maybe it's climate change. Climate change is now affecting our thinking and making us stupid. And I can't think of any other better word than that, is stupid. That's just, and I don't know what you want to do. People want to sue me, take me off the air, stop me from talking about this. Well, be my guest, because I'm tired of this. It's wrong. It's child abuse. And, where are the grandparents of these? Where are the parents of these children? Where are the grandparents who should be standing up and saying, hey, listen, we raised a lot of girls in our generation, and this is perfectly normal for them. You, my daughter, who has a daughter that is uncomfortable going through puberty. Grandparents should say to that woman, that mother of the teenager going through that, remind them that it was difficult for them too. But nobody embraced it and said, poor you, let's find a way for us to medically stop you from becoming a woman. Let's find a way to medically stop you from becoming a man. Now, I'm not talking here about what grown-ups do. I'm not talking here about, whatever. When you're an adult, you're going to make these decisions for yourself. And maybe there is something there when you're an adult that it's just so difficult to cope with the fact that, you just feel whatever you feel in terms of your sexuality. Okay, but at least you're not in puberty where confusion and discomfort are endemic. They are part and parcel of the process of growing up and becoming an adult, whether you're a boy or a girl turning into a man or a woman. Once you've gone through that phase and your hormones and your emotions have simmered down and you're more comfortable with who you are physically, sexually, etc., then that's a conversation to have. But most people don't have that conversation anymore because they get through it. And this is the problem that's going on with this particular subject right now, is we're not letting them get through it. We're not teaching them how to get through adversity, discomfort, feelings of inadequacy, or anything like that. We're giving them a pat on the head and we're saying, it's okay for you to feel it. You're right. You're right. I mean, that's the underlying message here. I have a problem because I'm not comfortable with my body as it changes as I grow and mature. You're right. There's a problem with that. That's what the therapeutic industry is talking about now. And that's the message they're giving. You're right. That's a problem. We should do something about that. I know. Let's mutilate those bodies. Let's chemically stop them from becoming adults. That is, I can't even find words to describe, to characterize what that is. And if you're a parent and your children are going through this, or you're worried about your children going through this, then you're the one that needs the coaching. You are the one that needs to learn how to help your children to go through the rough spots. And I can't help but think that maybe we've raised a generation of parents in this part of the world, because this is a phenomena of this part of the world. This is not happening in China. It's not happening in the third world or the second world or whatever you want to call it. This is a first world Western civilization problem. That in itself ought to tell you that there's a real issue here. And the issue here is not what we're blaming. So we've raised a whole generation of parents who fail to be parents when it comes to this kind of thing. And heaven only knows what else is going on that they are abdicating their responsibilities on, in terms of setting boundaries and providing structure and guidance to their children. And maybe holding their kid's hand when the kid needs somebody holding their hand. And maybe crying and suffering a little bit with them, but they'll get through it. I can't help but think that maybe there's an element of parents who can't stand the fact that the kids, their children, are suffering through a perfectly natural phase of their lives, and that they're looking for a way out. I just can't help but think that that's part of the problem here. Look, we better go for a break. We're as usual, we're a little over time. Okay, so stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Stick with us. Lots more to come here on the Joseph Ben-Ami Show. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. And we are back. Thank you for sticking with us. You're listening to the Joseph Ben-Ami Show, or perhaps you're watching it, although there's not a whole lot of things to watch, except for maybe that little sound wave that, flickers across the screen on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. I don't know if you're excited by that kind of thing or not, but should we be giving some sort of a warning at the beginning of our show? You may be triggered. Actually, that's a good idea. We actually should do that. Because as you know, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a I don't think we could say that it's a trigger-free zone. How do we put it? This is a trigger-happy zone. We're happy triggering people. And, there's no reason to be triggered. I'm not saying anything that's weird or outlandish or anything like that, but I guess I recognize that some people may be triggered. That's a term that is relatively new also in the modern lexicon or whatever. Oh, my goodness gracious. It's starting to get going here. Yeah, let's get into, let's collect our thoughts for a moment. Let's get into the Republican primary debate last night, talking about, kookiness, silliness, etc. I don't know if you had a chance to catch it. I don't know if you could find the whole debate on YouTube. I was looking for it last night to watch it live. I thought that probably we'd be able to catch it somewhere on YouTube. And unfortunately, I did find somebody that was doing it live. But what they were doing was they were capturing the live video from another website, and they were offering commentary along the way. And I thought, I have to tell you this, I thought that is brilliant. We're going to have to do that. I'm going to get a couple of people together. We're going to have a watch party for some of these live events. We're going to play the live event, and we're going to offer live running commentary along the way. That was just brilliant. Unfortunately, the people that I was watching on their website they were idiots. Now, I'm not just talking about forget about the debate for a second. Just the commentary. I mean, they were obviously lefties, okay, which is, I guess problematic in and of itself. But the commentary was so detached from the reality that it was actually kind of comedic, and then their sound was so loud that from time to time it would drown out the participants in the debate. So their commentary was so loud, so it was a little distracting, a little frustrating, but all the same, okay. It was. I just thought that the whole setup was quite interesting. So stay tuned for that, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do that at some point in time in the future, because I just thought it was a great idea, and to have some sort of conservative commentary on some of the stuff, especially some of the things that go on here in Canada, live. Maybe some live conservative commentary on some elections and stuff like that. I don't know. So we'll work it out. We'll keep you informed about it. But moving over now to the actual content of the debate, I have to tell you, I was deeply unimpressed with the everything that went on. I thought that there was very little thinking that was apparent in the answers that were given. Yeah. Now look, I'm a so-called political operative. I don't do a whole lot of that these days, but I still do some, and I do consulting, and I do some speech writing and communications work, etc., for politicians. And if you're a politician and you're interested in some consultations or advice, I'm always available to do that for a small fee. But set that aside. I can appreciate, because I've given this advice as well, I can appreciate the advice. Answer the question the way you want to answer it, not specifically the way or perfectly the way it was framed. In other words, give your message across, and ignore what the question actually was. And I've given that advice as well. But you have to have some common sense in how you are deploying that particular tactic or strategy. And it just seemed to me that it rather than it being a tactic to use from time to time, it became the norm. There was virtually I can't think of a single instance where any of the moderators, there were two moderators, there was Brett Baer, and I can't remember her first name, but her last name was McCallum. And they were under siege the whole night, I have to tell you. It was kudos to them that they didn't lose their temper and just storm away. We'll get to that in a second, okay? But, when the moderator asks you questions, you generally try to answer the questions. But I can't think of a single time when they even came close. It was like, okay, and these guys who were doing the running commentary were making note of it, and they weren't wrong. You know, you do this sometimes, and when you do it with a certain amount of skill, and you know, without you can't not be obvious when you're doing it, but you could be, I don't know, just a little more subtle in how you're handling it. Anyway, that every single one of them, I cannot think of a single time where any of the participants in the debate, there were 8 of them last night, I can't think of a single time where anyone actually responded to the questions, and the answers that they were given using that tactic were so ham-handed. It was painful to watch. And then the amount of bickering, finger pointing at one another, raising their voices. I mean, it was like children arguing at the kitchen table. I can't, again, that's the best way that I could describe it. It was appalling. There was no deep thinking. There was no indication of anything that was carefully thought through. Sometimes some people, some of the participants in the debate, would demonstrate that they had actually learned something prior to this debate about some of the subjects, that they were informed on some of the subjects, because they were able to quote from time to time some data, some statistics in what they were saying, which, of course, again, didn't necessarily have anything to do with the question that they were asked. Nonetheless, you know, they were giving answers. They were saying what they wanted to say, which, you know, brings me to the fact that it was all super coached. It was just theater. They were just reciting lines. And it was, again, there's a time and a place for that in these debates. There is a time and a place for it, for sure. And I have given that advice to people going and doing, participating in debates. For sure. There's a time and a place for it. But, you know, these guys were taking it to obscene ends last night. And then the way they were disrespectful to one another, and I have to say this, okay? Profoundly disrespectful to the process and to the moderators, who time and time and time again struggled to regain control over the participants. Nobody respected time constraints. And I'm not a big fan of time constraints in these debates, but when you have people on the stage, 8 people on the stage, you have to have some time rules. And, you know, I can understand when the little bell goes off that you've used your 30 seconds or however many seconds you have to answer a question. I can understand going over a little bit. But these guys would go over, you know, if you had 30 seconds, they'd give a 1.5 minute answer. And the bell kept ringing and ringing in some cases. And the moderator was going, okay, yeah, thank you very much. We have to move on. And of course, they would want to move on to somebody else that hadn't been front and center in the debate so far, to get them a chance to participate and give. Remember, it's not just whether it's fair to the participants or not. The audience wants to learn more about these people, presumably, because that's the whole point of having a public debate like this. And the participants would not let them do it. You know, Brett Baer, okay, Mr. Vice President, thank you very much. Mr. Vice President's not being very helpful, just going on and talking over him. Now, again, sometimes in these debates, you have to jump in and challenge the rules a little bit, be a little bit pushy, a little bit assertive in order to get your point across. And that's when you're looking for that moment, okay? If you want to talk strategy, if you want to talk how you do these debates, you're looking for that moment when you can jump in and give the soundbite. But a soundbite shouldn't last over, you know, a minute. And over and over and over again. There was no soundbite because everything was a soundbite last night. Really, really poorly done. And very disrespectful of the moderators. Very disrespectful. And I don't know how you can, I've seen some criticism on the internet and heard some criticism of how the debate was moderated last night. I don't know how you can blame the moderators for something like this. You would expect people who are running for the highest office, certainly in the United States, and arguably the highest elected office in the world, and they can't show any kind of decency to one another, any kind of respect to one another, and to the moderators who are, after all, just struggling to ensure that everything is fair and that everybody has a proper chance to present themselves, notwithstanding the lack of substance and content in the presentations that were being made. All the same, these moderators have a job to do, and you're running for the highest. My chief criticism of Donald Trump is not his policy. I think he's been atrociously treated. I think there's no excuse for what the Democrat-controlled Department of Justice in the United States is doing to him. I think it is a clear case of political partisan weaponization of what ought to be a nonpartisan body. So, on this stuff, I'm 100% on Donald Trump's side. But I don't like the man. I think he is an abysmal example to the people of the United States and around the world, especially youth, in the way he conducts himself and the way he interacts with other people. And, I've heard other people say, well, it works for him, so it must be okay. Well, beating my dog might work for me. And I don't have a dog and I don't beat my dog, for those of you who are going to criticize me for this, okay? But, beating your dog might keep him quiet, but that doesn't make it right. And you have to, when you have that kind of attention being focused on you as the leader of the free world, or the prospective leader of the free world, for Pete's sake, please have a little dignity and set a proper example. I don't think you lose votes as Donald Trump if you would set a proper example in the way that you conduct yourself. And you can be assertive, you can even be aggressive without resorting to name calling and all of this stuff. So that's my complaint against Donald Trump. Why do I say it now? I say it now because I didn't see a whole lot of examples of what I prefer to see in a leader that I think ought to be setting a good example for followers and for especially the youth of our country, or the youth of your country, I should say. I didn't see a lot of what I prefer from anyone on the stage last night. Gosh, now, I'm going to get all my Republican friends out there in the United States who are going to say, well, you have to do what you have to do. And I don't know. I went to bed last night after that debate, and I was discouraged. I was discouraged. I was disheartened, and I still am, because what I don't see anywhere in America today, and I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying the person doesn't exist. I'm saying from what I'm seeing, I don't see real leadership on any side of the political spectrum. And that bothers me a lot. We're going to take a break. We'll be back here in a couple of minutes on the Joseph Benamy Show. Don't go away. And welcome back. You are tuned into the Joseph Ben-Ami Show for Thursday, August the 24th, 2023. I'm your host, Joseph Ben-Ami. Thank you so much for staying with me. We've been talking about a lot of the craziness in the world. We started out talking about how India has just landed a craft, a module. I don't know how you want to describe it. It's not manned, but on the moon. They had a mission to the moon, and how crazy that is when you think about the crushing poverty that most citizens of India are experiencing, certainly in relation to what we're used to here in the West. And, you would think that the Indian government had some kind of a sense of responsibility to use their resources to look after their people, but apparently not. And I expressed my, my sense of irony, if you will, at the fact that I think, anyway, I should really use the term fact, but my belief that probably the people who are the most enamored by this and cheering their government on are probably the people who are suffering from that poverty that I'm referring to, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it. And then, just to be fair, to point out to you that I'm not just pointing the finger at the silliness and craziness of what's going on over in that part of the world. I brought it all back to here, and we were talking quite a bit about the whole transgender movement and the therapeutic movement. Really, you have to lay blame where it really is, and the blame isn't with the kids who feel that they have to transition. The blame really is with the therapeutic world and the parents who are going along with this. Who basically, these are kids. They don't know any better one way or the other, and they have to be told better. They have to be taught. They have to be guided, and we're just failing them badly and subjecting them to the most horrible physical abuse. When you think about the mutilation that's going on in the name of science, in the name of health, that is just, it's perverted and it's crazy like anything that you've ever seen. And then we had to move south of the border to what was going on last night and talking about crazy and, the utter, complete lack of leadership material that's apparent anyway in the American political world. I'm sure that there are people, prospective good leaders that are in politics in the United States, but they were not on display last night, and I just don't know where they are, to be perfectly honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. Very frustrating. And getting back to the debate, the Republican primary debate, I've said some good things about the moderators, and I'm not going to take any of that back. I felt bad for them. I thought they were terribly disrespected by the participants in the debate. But I have to ask the question, who came up with the subjects and the questions that were put to the participants? There are lots of things that are going on in the world. And I could throw stones at the participants for the way they conducted themselves, for their canned answers, for the lack of any kind of apparent deep thinking into the problems, and, being fair to the participants and to everybody. There were so many people on the stage last night, 8 participants. It's really hard to in that kind of a format, to give any kind of a serious thought to the issues and to make a presentation to answer the questions in any kind of a serious way. When you're given 30 seconds to talk about the relationship between between the United States and China, or between China and the free world, more broadly speaking, how do you do that in 30 seconds? It's virtually impossible. So, okay, yeah, look, fine. Of course, the participants weren't limiting themselves to 30 seconds in any event, but still. Okay, so having said all of that, I have to point out, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know who came up with the questions, but they were banal, and in most cases, and then we took banality to an absurd level by starting to ask questions about UFOs. I mean, seriously? Seriously? If you're president of the United States, will you come clean with the American people about what we know and don't know about the UFOs out there? I mean, come on, guys. Come on. Is this a serious question? Well, apparently it was. Of course, we couldn't get the answer from anybody, except, maybe Chris Christie really addressed the question a little bit. But, nobody else really answered the question. And is that what we've sunk to that level? Is that how bad things are in the United States right now? And what does that say? What does that portend for the rest of the world? I mean, like it or not, the United States is still the world's most powerful country. And like it or not, the president of the United States, whoever he or she is still going to be ostensibly the leader of the free world. How do you deal with that? I'll tell you what I'm hoping. And I don't think this is going to make any difference one way or the other, I guess, ultimately. But, maybe I'm wrong. But I'm actually hoping, I can't believe I'm saying this, but that a third-party candidate emerges that can bridge the gap, the partisan gap, the senseless partisan gap, I should say, between Republicans and Democrats in the United States. And somehow or other work together or bring people in the center together to form some sort of an administration. I'm not talking about a third party here, although, maybe that's what's necessary. I just don't know. But there has to be somebody out there that could be an example to our youth of decent leadership with decent policies and the ability to bring people together. I cannot believe, I refuse to believe that there is nobody out there that can fill that role. Whether they decide that they're going to enter politics or run for president or not, that's a separate issue. And at this stage, given the cost of running for office, given the late date, it's hard for me to conceive of who that person may be. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying that a person who can fill that role doesn't exist. I'm sure they do. But right now, they are not running for office. I mean, that's just the reality that we have to deal with, that we have to live with. So if I have somehow or other depressed you with this show today, this episode, I don't mean to. I'm sorry, but, as I always say, I got to call it like I see it. And I just see things being really not in a good place right now, whether we're in Canada or the United States or the Western world. And we have to start dealing with these issues. And the starting point is that people like you and me, we have to start speaking out. We have to start asserting ourselves and saying, okay, we need some common sense here, ladies and gentlemen. We need some common sense. We have to stop with the insistence that people drink the Kool-Aid. And I'm speaking as somebody on the right hand of the political spectrum here, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that most of that common sense exists on the conservative side of things. But even people who call themselves conservatives today, they need a little dose of common sense and a little dose of reality as well. And I hope that I provide some of that, at least stimulate some of that discussion. And I hope that I'm encouraging you, our listeners, my listeners, to do this as well. Don't sit silent in the face of abuse, foolishness, childishness, because it's our world, it's our country. All right, final break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here on the Joseph Ben-Ami Show. Don't go away. And we are back. You are tuned into the Joseph Ben Show for Thursday, August 24th, 2023. I'm your host, Joseph Ben. Thanks for sticking with us. Oh, it has been a frenetic show tonight. And this is just the beginning, because I am, on some of the stuff that we've talked about tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I have reached the breaking point. On this therapeutic stuff, I'm just at the end of my rope. And I can guarantee you I'm going to start speaking out on this more often. And I hope that you guys are going to support me when they come after me for it, because they will come after me. But I'm not going to back down on this anymore. What's going on in this profession, in the therapeutic world, is so wrong. The brain, what's the word I want to look for? The brain dead, it's like there's something in the water, and I was just joking earlier, but, blame it on global warming. I don't care. There's something not right. Something collectively has gripped the profession of social work, psychology, psychiatry, medicine in our part of the world, where they're just doing what they're doing to children. But, there's not much more that you and I can do about it, except to speak out on it. All right. This day in history. 3 items that I want to bring to your attention. The first, ladies and gentlemen, is that on this day in 1814, British forces, which would be, predominantly Canadian. I'm always talking about the nice things between Canada and the United States and closest allies, etc. And unfortunately, it wasn't always that way. And during the War of 1812, in the year 1814, British/Canadian forces attacked and captured the city of Washington, D.C., and burned several government buildings down, including the Capitol building and the Executive Mansion. That would be the White House. On this day in 1814. What else happened on this day in 1814? Interesting bit of trivia. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, that alliance that we constantly talk about when it comes to the situation developing, ongoing, some might say even deteriorating situation in Eastern Europe. NATO came into force, into existence on this day in 1949. The treaty had actually been signed about 4 months earlier, but this is the day that the treaty actually came into effect. And also a little bit of ancient history. In the year 79 of the Common Era, Mount Vesuvius erupted, destroying the Roman city of Pompeii. That also occurred on this day, August the 24th, in the year 79 of the Common Era. That would be AD for those of you that use BC and AD as your timelines. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I said before, coming to the end of another frenetic, controversial episode, I guess, Check out the website, www.josephbenamy.com, all one word without the hyphen. While you're there, sign up for email updates. It's absolutely free, and we do not share your information with anyone else. Check out our recommended reading. And what else should I say? I guess that's pretty much it. I could go on and on about the website, etc., but I don't think so. Not tonight. I'm exhausted. I've blown a lot of my emotional energy, and so I'm just going to leave things the way they lie. Please do check it out, though. And it's really nice to be back with you guys. I'm really glad we didn't get a full weekend this week. We did get last night and tonight, and then Monday evening next week. Oh, my goodness gracious. The summer is almost entirely gone. Oh, and no, I'm going to save it for next week. We're going to talk about global warming and some of the interesting data that has emerged in Eastern Ontario, where I'm living, on the subject of climate change and global warming that I hope will give thinking people some pause when it comes to their concerns about the world burning up. But we're going to save that for Wednesday, or not Wednesday, we're going to save that for Monday of next week, so you'll have to tune in then. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. God bless you. Stay safe, and we will see you again Monday evening here on the Joseph Ben-Ami Show.